Hi, and welcome to Filmmakers Compass Podcast, a show where we talk about movies and more movies. I'm D-Man, joined by CP. And CP, how are you doing today?
D-Man, I kind of messed it up last week. My introduction is nowhere near as good as yours, so I'm glad you've decided to take back over.
I was going to say, I actually really enjoyed it. It was nice to switch it up for a change. And
Yeah, but there's just things the way they're meant to be, and you just got to lead us in, man. That's just the way it goes.
oh, well, thank you very much. Yes, it was so much fun last week. We actually had our guest, Sean Gaston, on the show, and we had a blast. But to that end, we recorded things a little bit out of order, a little bit different. So we were testing out some new stuff, and that led to CP doing our intros, which was fantastic.
And our shout outs. Yeah, it was a little different, huh?
Yeah, no, but it was a fun episode, man. Like getting to have Sean on and a guest, especially when he's so passionate about both Lord of the Rings and Rings of Power. It was an incredible episode. We went way longer than I think anybody thought we were because we had sort of set a record time and we blew past that. I
And
mean,
we
because
will tell the audience there is a director's cut out there that's around like 3.5 hours long.
yeah, right. Like we had to edit some of the stuff down because, we just started talking about different stories and everything. You get Sean on here and we just start talking, but it was fun. It was a really good time. So, we did actually get a chance to check out, the first couple episodes of Rings of Power season 2. We will not be talking about that on this week's podcast episode though, CP, because we usually do, or usually there was only one season before. But we usually do maybe a mid-season and then a end of the season wrap where we kind of get
For sure.
dive more into it. I don't like necessarily to be overly critical of shows when they're going episode to episode because sometimes, right, if you get to the end, your criticisms from before might either be answered or rectified.
Very
So
true.
nothing wrong with calling them out as they're happening, but yeah, once you get more of the complete story, you might be like, that really wasn't an issue. So anyway,
Very
we'll
true.
talk about that at a later time. But before we jump into our topics this week, I do have a couple shout outs. So we're resuming
Boom. You're back to
normal.
doing the shout outs.
Yes. So first up, CP. This is a huge one. We have a brand new subscriber to the YouTube channel, my good buddy Alex, who actually checked out the podcast, loved it, and he subscribed and is now tuning into the show, which is fantastic. I actually met him through a friend, and since then we've connected over WWE, movies, some late night
Okay.
shenanigans.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I'm feeling a little self-conscious here and definitely threatened by this budding friendship with someone who you seem to be grooming to be my replacement.
No, but thing is, I will definitely, Alex, I will reach out to you again after having talked to you about the show last week. And if there is something related to movies or for that matter, a specific movie, let me know. And we'd love to have you on for a segment or as a guest. So, and I'm just glad you enjoy movie discussion, as much as I do. So awesome to have you as a subscriber. Next up on our shout outs, Ivor. And he goes on to say, CP, question for you guys. Do you think that there is one TVA that controls time for the whole multiverse, or each multiverse has their own TVA controlling time and all of its branches? Which is a direct reference to the Deadpool and Wolverine episode. And thus, if you go back in time, both Loki and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, the Marvel MCU multiverse. So, what are your thoughts, CP? Because I don't know if you've seen all of those or have you?
I'm trying to think. I think that there's got to be, well, trying to think about what Marvel says in the films, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It seems like there's one TVA,
Okay.
and I think that, yeah, so that's just how I'm going to answer it. I think that there's just got to be one.
I we did not discuss this beforehand, but I have to actually agree with you. Having watched Loki seasons 1 and 2, my impression of the multiverse branching out is that each one is like a different timeline. So I get what you're
Mhm.
saying though. I get what he's saying, which is
Yeah.
like there's timelines and then the multiverse or like different universes. And is each unique timeline in, the Marvel MCU a different section of the multiverse or just a different timeline of that current
Yeah.
universe? So I don't know. I'm not 100% sure because you think about that scene in Avengers Endgame when Hulk goes to take the Infinity, the Time Stone, and he like pulls it out and then it branches. But you're like, is that a multiverse or is it just a different timeline?
Yeah, I don't know.
But I
It's a
will
good
say this,
question.
Ivor, based on what I have seen and the way that Marvel has treated the TVA, it leads me to believe that there is only one TVA and it is controlling things at a multiversal level. But again, we'd probably need a little bit of clarity here on exactly how those things work. And despite all of the explanation and miss minutes and everything in Loki that tries to explain all this, mind's still blown. I don't know how the multiverse works. So, Ivor, I will also extend to you if you would love to discuss that and you have a theory. Let me know because we would love to get you on to discuss that more in depth as well. So, and then Ivor goes on to say, "I agree with D Man." Sorry, CP.
Ivor, what are you doing to me, man? What are you doing?
That's amazing. No one ever agrees with me. It's always you. And he said Deadpool could work in a group setting film. Just give him one or two clips and move on. So I could see him in that like Avengers Endgame role where like they bring everybody together. He's there, but he's maybe not, Iron Man.
Okay.
Kind of get it. And then finally, just love to give a birthday shout out to Bob. Happy birthday, man. And hope you had a good one.
Happy birthday, Bob.
So I'm going to throw it over to you, CP. It is time for our box office breakdown.
All right, everyone. Let's take a look at our this past weekend's box office numbers during the box office breakdown. Now, we did not talk about what was going on in the box office last week's episode. Had too much other stuff going on. So that was a portion that did not make the final cut. But let's just jump in. So Labor Day weekend, people went to the movies, we can tell. Number one movie in America still happens to be Deadpool and Wolverine.
Wow.
Number two, Alien Romulus.
So they're raking it in.
Yep. It's made a pretty decent gross so far for Disney, almost $100 million.
Peanuts. Yeah.
And number three, premiering last weekend was the biopic Reagan
Oh,
with Dennis
yes.
Quaid. Number four, Twisters is still in the top five, and then
No way. Isn't that
yeah,
out on digital?
yeah, it's actually been in the box office for seven weeks now.
So it is a summer flick. It looks like it's doing pretty good then.
Yep, and that's made upwards of $250 million. So again, not terrible, right?
Yeah, I mean, not Deadpool and Wolverine, but also not bad.
Not bad, not bad at all. And then in the fifth spot, It Ends with Us, which despite the controversy surrounding the film is still in the top five and has made upwards of $135 million total. Now, when we jump over to the international box office, again, things have not really changed. Inside Out 2 still leading the worldwide box office gross with over 1.5 billion. Deadpool and Wolverine still right on the heels with almost 1.5 billion.
It's going to catch it.
4, Dune Part 2, Godzilla Kong.
Dune Part 2, for real?
Still up there is the highest grossing for the year. Now, when we look at the worldwide box office, though, when we drop down to something like Alien Romulus, right, which is the number 2 movie in America, that's only managed to be the 10th movie worldwide in terms of box office gross. So not quite performing as well internationally as it seems like it has been domestically, but
well, it's kind of crazy because that international box office, I mean, it can really turn an entire franchise. I think we've talked before about the success of like the Fast and the Furious franchise and how once it went international, they picked up, so many fans and such big budgets and extravagant travel. But you look at like the success of something like Inside Out 2, it did really well here domestically, but at the same time, it's really that international box office that has shot that to be the highest grossing movie so far of this year.
Yep.
Quite impressive. And then we also mentioned what was it? Kong X Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
That did really, really well internationally. So, I mean, to anybody that goes and sees these movies, I mean, I to me, they're exactly what I expect. I'm not expecting Godzilla -1, but they're big monster flicks and they're cool, but to anybody that's like, how do these keep getting made? You're like, they do really well internationally.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's why.
That's just how some of them are. So that's the box office. Let's get into this week's episode, which if you are watching on video, my t-shirt might be a cue as to what we're going to be talking about this week.
Yes, you're wearing a baseball cap and your shirt says, "You're killing me, Smalls," because in honor of essentially heading into the new season, autumn, we decided to take a look back at, end of summer and one of our favorite summer movies of all time, The Sandlot. So we're going to be discussing that a little bit more in depth. And CP, we just did the box office breakdown. So I want to start off the discussion with Sandlot, box office related, which is why don't they make movies like The Sandlot anymore? Is it just money?
I think that's got to be it. I think that, I mean, for one, right, there are seasons within the box office. And those seasons I'm talking about are much more kind of macro in the sense that there are genres that come in and out of fashion. And I think that kind of the coming of age family films like The Sandlot just aren't really in style anymore.
Yeah, it's
Especially
weird.
with box office as fickle as they are and studios determined to get a sure bet, they want sequels, they want established IP, and these type of stories that are totally original content, just that's not where money's going right now.
Yeah, you think like during our youth, you're going back to like 90s kids, which is cool. You have Sandlot, Rookie of the Year, Mighty Ducks and D2, Big Green, Little Giants, Angels in the Outfield, all of these movies, I mean, by and large, either based on, some established franchises. You have the Cubs and the Angels there, the Giants. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
Mighty Ducks spawned a franchise.
Yep, they did.
So yeah, I mean that the Anaheim Ducks. So like that actually happened. But I mean, like you look at something like The Sandlot, and it's sort of the themes of friendship, of you know enjoying that time you have when, because I think the scene that actually hits me the most in this movie is at the very end when he talks about every summer after this we still got together until everybody sort of moved away and grew up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like what was really cool is I'm sure we all have a summer somewhere in our youth where you look back and you're like, it was amazing. You know, you either slept in a treehouse or we slept on our trampoline under the stars, or, you know, uh,
Yep.
we used to play rollerblade hockey in the cul-de-sac, or cul-de-sac baseball. Um, we actually did build forts in the woods. It's pretty
Yep.
cool.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's just weird because I feel like people are nostalgic for these movies, but then anytime the studios are brave enough to actually produce one, it doesn't return, I think, what they're looking for. Like they're not looking to produce a movie for $5 million and then have it make 25, 30.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, if we're going to put something in theaters, we need a bigger return than that, even though that would be a profitable, successful movie.
Yep.
So, but on that note, then, CP, do you find that the transition to streaming presents opportunities for movies like this? Because I will compare it to, again, sort of going back to late 90s, 2000s, the Disney Channel. We got a lot of Disney Channel original movies. It was an opportunity to tell more down to earth stories, but they also did feel ridiculously cheaper than The Sandlot.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't know. What do you think? Streaming, is that an opportunity for us to hopefully, I don't know, get some of these movies again? What about the movie Three Ninjas? Like, would that ever get made? I don't think it would.
No, I think you're right. And I don't know when these style of movies exactly fell out of fashion. As you said, Disney Channel, the direct to cable model, made a lot of movies that were kind of in this style, just not as well done
Yeah.
without the longevity and the long life.
And so we've acknowledged this before. If you go way, way back in our anthology of FCP, we talked about Home Alone. And I think I remember telling you when we did that episode
Mm-hmm.
that I
Mm-hmm.
was like, Home Alone could have easily been the premise for a Disney Channel original movie for the holidays.
Yep.
And it could have been made at a much lower budget. It could have looked pretty horrible. It's probably what Home Alone 4 is.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, exactly.
in the wrong hands, that movie could have ended up as kind of a crappy movie. And yet here we have a real cinematic take on just, baseball in summer, which I don't know. I love it. And I kind of wish they did make more movies like this.
Well, I like nostalgia. I like the nostalgia factor. I like okay, again, I think another thing that makes The Sandlot work so well, as opposed to those Disney Channel growing up, coming of age sports movies that Disney, cranked out one a month for
Yeah,
years.
right. I love Johnny Tsunami, but
I think the difference is The Sandlot was made with an approach and a reverence for the past. And
yeah,
so since even though it was made in 93 and it's being set in 1962, it has a timeless quality because it's not being told in the present. Where when you look at those Disney Channel movies, Johnny Tsunami or Brink or any of those,
yeah,
they're being made as though they are for kids in the 90s about life in the 90s. And I think that kind
yeah.
of puts an expiration date on the content.
That's a good point. And I think Home Alone goes to great lengths to protect that for Christmas. And here I think you're right that it flashing back in time sort of makes it a classic for generations rather than the generation it was made, which, yeah, I think that makes sense. And then I also love that line later when he is sort of running down what happened to everybody. And he's like, this guy, he got really into the 60s and no one ever saw him again. And I'm like, that's freaking perfect. Like, no one ever saw him again. There's always that one guy.
Yeah,
You're like,
right.
I don't know. Like, I had a friend, when I was a kid, he used to live on our block, Thomas Riddle, which is pretty close to Voldemort.
I
Tom Riddle.
I know, dude. Maybe he is Voldemort.
No, and he moved away. He moved to Tennessee. Like, I always remember us all hanging out. We were like neighborhood kids. We built forts, played sports, did all that. And he just moved away. And I don't know what happened to him.
Maybe he listens to this podcast.
I mean, Thomas, if you're out there, hit me up. But yeah, no, I mean, like, I would love to see more movies like this actually get made because I feel like kids today they're just shown the classics, but they don't get a version of their own,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which I don't know. But CP, okay. So non-baseball movies. I want to throw this over to you.
Ooh.
Is The Sandlot like your favorite summer movie? And there's some good ones. Like for me, I'm probably going with National Lampoon's Vacation is
Okay.
a classic road trip summer film. That summer vacation that all the kids, families in the Midwest did.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's done it. We drove down to Florida, from Indiana. I think another one, which would you consider this a summer movie, but Do the Right Thing?
Ooh, I actually would consider Do the Right Thing a summer movie.
Yeah, it's the
I don't
heat,
typically
the
think
heat
of it
wave.
as a summer movie, right? Because I think
Yeah,
a lot of summer movies kind of instill I think we typically think of kind of summer movies as sort of fun blockbustery type stuff.
yeah.
And Do the Right Thing is dealing with like serious social issues. But it's definitely a summer movie, right? It's the hottest day of the year.
I mean, Stand by Me
Oh,
is a
oh,
classic.
yep.
I mean, even I think it's worth noting, like Dirty Dancing.
I guess that technically is a summer movie,
Don't they go away to like summer?
like dance camp or something.
Yeah, it's like some sort of camp. I'm
I
like,
don't
yeah,
know,
I could
dude.
see it.
No.
Heavyweights,
Oh, summer camp movie right there. That's a good call. Didn't even think
dude.
about heavyweights.
I don't know why, but I love the line at the beginning of Heavyweights when his dad's talking to him about going to camp, and he's like, "Why don't you go to fat camp? You're fatter than I am." And he's like talking to his own dad. Oh, that movie's such a
uh,
classic.
what a good one.
But I mean, I think for me personally, I think the best movie on this list, as well as probably one of my favorite movies that I do watch every year, is going to be Jaws.
Yeah.
Like Jaws is amazing. What about like Point Break? It's not really summary. It's
I
just
don't think of it as summary.
yeah. I think the
Just
only other one.
awesome.
Did you ever see Adventureland?
Oh, Yes, the one about like the theme park.
Yeah, and then it's like their summer job.
Yeah.
I felt like that kind of worked. You have like uh other movies like Road Trip, Wet Hot American Summer, Dazed and Confused. But I think if I had to pick out of anything on that list, like what is a summer film? I think I'm going with Jaws.
Okay. I
I
think
mean,
that's a good choice.
and it's so well done. I mean, it's definitely a movie I watch every 4th of July weekend.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I'm just interested because it's so weird. We have like Christmas movies, Halloween movies. We have sort of seasonal things that come up. We've done this before on the podcast. Never with summer movies, but what are those ones that just play better when, you're at the cabin at the lake?
Yeah. Yeah.
On that note, Friday the 13th.
Technically a summer movie. You are
Yeah, but
absolutely
I
right.
think
The
that's
way
going
it's
to be
summer
a
camp.
horror film. It's going to
I mean,
absolutely
if you're gonna go horror film route, then technically I Know What You Did Last Summer is also in that same vein.
bam. That's a good one.
Now, this one is an indie film. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called Summer Days, Summer Nights,
Ooh, I
and
don't know
it's
if I
about
have.
a bunch of people in the 1980s growing up on Long Island, and it just follows the three major summer holidays. It starts with Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day, and it's just relationships and life over the course of the summer through those 3 weekends.
I feel like now I need to watch it. That sounds fantastic.
It's awesome.
All right. Well, when it comes to the Sandlot, I think one of the things that really stands out to me is the movie starts off using the analogy of getting into a pickle, but that's a reference to, getting stuck between two bases in a baseball game. But
Mm-hmm.
really the whole lead up is to the pickle that they get into with Hercules, the dog,
Yep.
who steals their baby baseball. And everything builds to this. I think the movie does it really, really well because they start off with the analogy of the pickle. Immediately, when he meets all the other kids, they're talking about the Big Bambino, and he's like, "Who's that?" So immediately they're connecting all these dots that end up playing out, whether it's the treehouse and the story of the beast. I actually think this movie's incredibly well written.
Yeah, it is. Again, considering it's a kids movie, there's a lot of serious things. I mean, when you speak of the writing, the dream sequence, not to drop spoilers here, but I assuming everyone has seen it over the past 30 something years.
It
I
is 30
always
plus.
think about the sequence where Benny has the dream and he meets Babe Ruth.
Yeah.
And Babe Ruth has that line, right? About how everyone gets one moment to be great.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is such a mature conversation to have in like what we would typically consider a kids movie.
Yeah. And then what's his famous line? Heroes get remembered, but legends never die,
Yep.
which is absolutely classic. But it's weird because like I see the Sandlot fitting in that vein of like a Christmas story where it is made up of vignettes, right? They're at the
Yep.
pool, it's 4th of July, they're at the fair. You're sort of running through these summer moments,
Mm-hmm.
seasonal moments that happen, right? They play that other team, the like official team
Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
baseball, which is so great because they have that back and forth with one of the kids where they're doing the insults.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like, "You play ball like a girl," and then everybody's like, "Oh, you jerk,"
Yeah.
which
Like,
which actually reminds me a little bit of like, "I triple dog dare you,"
yeah, right.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's that moment. But I mean, I don't know. I love that sequence though because he's like, "Hey, is that your sister in the outfield naked?" And you're like, "What?" But anyway, yeah, it sort of plays like these vignettes. Reminds me a little bit of A Christmas Story with like the overarching element being in that case the gift,
Yeah.
right? And sort of Red Rider and will he get, basically the whole time he's asking whether it's his mom, his teacher, Santa at the mall, right?
Yeah.
How can I get this thing that I want? And in this, they're actually leading up to the pickle and a more dreadful moment than, whether or not you just get something or not. But I think they lay the breadcrumbs properly across this entire story. So it doesn't just feel like these disconnected vignettes.
Yeah.
It all builds to something that pays out and is actually pretty epic because despite it, right, not having like Avengers Endgame stakes, it is something that happened that they'll probably never forget.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to that end, that's really what those youthful summers are about is something happens somewhere where you're like, we'll always be connected because of it and we'll all always remember it. We'll
Yep.
probably tell our own kids,
Yep.
and then just like A Christmas Story as well, they have a narrator,
Yep.
which I think works well here. And apparently, I didn't know this prior to doing my research for our podcast, but that is actually the director of the movie, the
Yeah.
writer and director.
Which is pretty cool. Right.
Yeah,
So obviously you can tell he put a lot of his himself into this film, which is probably part of the reason why people remember it so fondly, right? It's a very personal film and he was telling a story that he felt mattered.
yeah. And then I also like the dynamic of him and sort of his stepdad, where there's this uneasy tension at home, which I think is really the reason why taking the Babe Ruth signed baseball and using it is so dramatic to a kid, right? It's
Yeah.
not that you're doing something you shouldn't have done. They've been doing that all movie. It's that there's this tension between him and his stepdad that he's basically like, I'm going to blow that.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Right. And I think that really works from a stakes element. It's something that I think kids can relate to. It's something easy to understand, but also, yeah, it's like, I don't care what happens, we have to get this ball back.
Yeah.
Like, we have to. Because they kind of say, they're like, it's gone, Smalls, like, whatever.
Yeah.
And for the kids, he says, oh, well, it's signed by this guy, Baby Ruth, or this lady or
Some
something.
lady.
Yeah, Baby Ruth. And they're like, Babe Ruth. Like, so they want to do it for the signature, but he doesn't really care that. He didn't even know who it was, to be
No.
honest.
Yeah.
He needs it back to salvage that relationship, with his dad.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah.
that's really good stakes. Yeah, I like that a lot. And then of course I like Hercules the dog. I think they do a really good job. I mean, I don't know. I guess there is only one dog actor that was in this movie. And I don't know. They actually have quite a few shots of the dog chasing Benny.
Really? I would have sworn that they had two. And I'm guessing that it's just then accomplished via
Pup.
um camera, right, focal points. But early on, when they first encounter the true dog, right, we see the fake puppet dog, right, in the flashback, and there's the scene with the paw and things where you can tell it's not a real dog and it's really exaggerated how big it is. But when Benny first, he gets his PF Flyers, he jumps the fence,
Yeah.
that dog seems bigger than the dog at the very end. When the fence falls over, they pick it up and they bring it back in the house.
Well, apparently they used a puppet dog for a lot of the close-up shots. And it's
Really?
for dramatic effect. It's supposed to look better or bigger. It's supposed to look like the dog from like the legend. So
Mm,
that, oh yes, it is a big dog, but when you see the real dog, you're like, I mean, he was just a dog.
yeah.
But like they see the beast as like a monster. You think about Squints telling that story when they have s'mores and sleep over in the treehouse, and he's like, he ate a kid and
How long did it ever stay under the house? Forever.
forever.
Yeah.
So, like there's this sort of legend. And I think they were actually using the puppet version of the dog to enhance that legend by making it seem much bigger than it actually was. So you're not wrong. And again,
Makes
I think it
sense.
works really well. I like that the conclusion of the movie. It's kind of ironic that like it's almost like life where you'd be like, what are the chances that we lost a Babe Ruth signed baseball in the exact house of a guy that has another Babe Ruth signed baseball?
Mhm.
Like, seems astronomically low, but it also, in a weird way, seems like something that would happen. Like, you'd be like,
Right.
there's no way. Like, it's so unbelievable that you're kind of like, I could believe it.
Yeah, right.
So, and I love that scene where, like, the guy's basically like, well, why didn't you just knock on the door? I would have gotten it for you.
That's like so kids though, right? They're like, no, that's the mean old guy. You can't trust him. Like, that's just the way kids see the world. And I think that's executed so perfectly because you're like, yeah, they went roundabout. They created all these ways to try and retrieve the ball when they could have just done the simplest, like most straightforward approach. It would have been the best.
Yeah, if we just, yeah, you're like, we wouldn't have a whole story if we just knocked. But you're like, that's the worldview of a kid at that time. Is like, well, we can't do that. Um, but yeah, like I think the way the story's written and the way it all comes together, I think it actually works really, really well. But again, I do, it's not reinventing the wheel here. I think it's borrowing just and applying it to a different time of the year, a different situation, but it works really well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, that timeless quality, I think they use music really well throughout the
Mm-hmm.
movie. There's quite a
Mm-hmm.
few songs. Uh, I think I have a rundown. Finger Poppin' Time, Smokey Part 2, The Lion Sleeps Tonight, There Goes My Baby, This Magic Moment, America the Beautiful, Tequila, and Wipeout, which those are all classic. I think, especially
Mm-hmm.
having grown up with this movie, I think we all
Yeah.
know most of
Right.
those songs. And if you didn't know it by the title there, I bet if I played it for you, you'd be like, oh yeah, The Sandlot.
Yeah. Right.
But I think it helps, like you said, ground the film in an era that it's not of the 90s.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel dated, I think, the way something maybe like Mighty Ducks might, where you're like, that's totally 90s. You know, they're rollerblading, the music is from that time. I think they go to Hans's shop and it's like a total 90s song.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're like, I mean, you could totally see where in that instance you're like, yeah, this is a movie that I grew up with, but it is a 90s film and it feels dated today. Where
Yeah.
Sandlot still feels amazing.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think America the Beautiful is when it's 4th of July.
Yep.
They have that fireworks scene. Tequila is when they're all puking on the ride after eating some chew, which again is totally something kids would probably do. I don't know if today's kids are going to get chew, but I could just see kids doing something and then being like, "Oh crap!"
Yeah. 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 Right.
Like 100%. Wipeout is when he has to pickle the
Pickle the
beast.
beast.
You know, they I don't know. Lion Sleeps Tonight, I think, is the treehouse sleep out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. They just have all these. And then this magic moment, isn't that
That's the
Squints,
kiss.
yeah, kissing Wendy Peppercorn?
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yep.
apparently, again, if you go all the way back to the end of the movie where he's talking about what happens to everybody, apparently they got married and had 9 kids.
9 kids.
Yeah, well, Squints was ready for action, you know? So, but yeah, I mean, there's just so many classic sort of moments that, you know, I like, there's so many good jokes too. Like, you're killing me, Smalls. And, uh, do you want a s'more? And he's like, some more what? You know, it's like stupid,
Yeah.
but you're like, that's exactly how it would go.
Yep.
Or like, I don't know, any kid ever, you know, doing something with your dad where you don't know how to do it yet, you know, and he's like trying to play catch with his dad and he just runs the ball back and like drops it in his glove, which is like wholly embarrassing, you know.
Yeah.
And his stepdad reacts that way, but like I'm sure we've all, you know, whether it's, you know, I again, you go back to a Christmas Story, like helping your dad change a tire or something, like I'm sure we've all been there in a moment where your dad's like, "What are you doing?" Like for real.
Yeah.
Like hold
Yeah.
the thing or do this or, you know, help me, shine the light, you know. It's always it's that dad speak. And here it's like probably so embarrassing. He's like, "I'd rather never do this again."
Yeah. Right.
You know, than have to go throw a ball with you just because I'm like, oh my God, how does this work?
Yeah. Right. Oh God. Funny.
So, or I love when Benny tells him, he's like, hey, burn that hat.
Do you have a fireplace?
Yeah, throw it in there.
Yeah.
He's like, no, you can't show up with that hat. But I do always love too, just that feeling of like youthful angst. You know, I think there's a scene where he's talking to his mom and he's like, you know, I feel like an egghead. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not good at anything.
Yeah.
And his mom's kind of telling him, like, you won't be with an attitude like that. But generally, it's like, then go do things.
Yeah.
And you'll either find out what you're good at, what you like, and you can either, if you're good at it already, continue to do it. Or if you like it, you can try to get good at it.
Yeah.
But she's like, you can't just sit here in your room all day and expect to be good at anything.
Yep.
So, or for that matter, make friends. And so it's weird too, because I think about the Sandlot and even, you know, we have a generation that sort of has grown up with screens everywhere, whether it's phones, iPads, TVs, computers, all that. And I think you sound like an old man whenever you're like, back in my day, we played outside. But like this movie kind of throws back to that era where it was like, he yells to his mom. He's like, "Mom, I'm going out." You're like, "Where?"
Yeah.
I don't know. He goes down to the drugstore. He goes to the Sandlot to go play baseball with some kids that he doesn't know. Ironically, later he ends up in one of the Sandlot neighbors' homes. And the mom's like,
They have a sleepover at a fort
yeah,
in a vacant lot.
like I don't know. It's just weird because yeah, it's like there's a whole generation that probably doesn't experience that, and that's one of those weird things. Like right, like I think about if I were to have kids, and I'm like, would I just let them like if they were like, "Hey, Dad, I'm gonna go over here," I'd be like, I don't think so. Maybe if I was still living in Indiana, but not so much LA.
Yeah, I think that's probably a big part of it too, right? Time and place are a big factor.
Yeah.
And obviously the movie is kind of ambiguous about the place that it's set, but it it evokes, you know, that kind of everywhere Americana.
Yeah, and they have a couple really good exterior shots, which again use really great to kind of set the setting with like the mountains as a backdrop,
Mhm.
which I guess I didn't know this. I assumed it was filmed in California, but it was actually filmed in Salt Lake City.
I remember reading that it was because getting development that looked like the 60s. I mean, I imagine it's supposed to be set in the valley from the
Yeah, that's what but
1960s.
they never say.
There's a lot of very specific like Dodgers references that made me think it was LA based.
Yeah, when he's like he's a L7 weenie, he's a Dodger dog.
Yeah,
Benny
they talk
plays
about
for the Dodgers.
they talk about Maury. Well, like, Benny has the Dodger cap. It's very so I always thought it was supposed to take place in the valley, but I know that they said that when they went to make it, the valley didn't look quite like that anymore.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I like how they were able to set that scene. I mean, just as a fun fact, like I guess it was filmed in 42 days,
Hmm.
which is pretty cool. I mean, I actually, while we're on the topic, I have a couple of like
All
behind the
right,
scenes
let's break it
facts, so
down.
I'll
Let's
run
go.
them through. The pool scene and Wendy Peppercorn. That scene where Squints fakes drowning to kiss Wendy was inspired by a real life experience of the film's director. So you were correct. A lot of this probably is based on his stuff.
Okay.
David
So did
Mickey
he
Evans.
want to kiss a lifeguard or did he actually fake drowning and kiss a lifeguard? Because those are very different experiences.
He confessed that he had a similar crush on a lifeguard when he was younger and dreamed of doing that,
Oh,
but never did it.
all right.
So,
Fair
which I
enough.
mean, in this day and age, I mean, it could be just instead of a harmless kiss, it's a sexual assault. So,
True. Very true.
maybe just dream it. But number two, the treehouse and the campout scene. The treehouse was built for the movie was actually functional, and it held all the kids and cast and crew, which
That's
is
freaking awesome.
actually pretty dope. And it says the actors spent a lot of time in there as an actual treehouse between takes, which helped them bond and added authenticity to their on-screen friendships.
I love that. I think as a director, that's like a brilliant move. Just put kids in a treehouse and let them hang out. Of course, they'll
Yeah,
make
like
friends.
that's really neat. I mean, obviously, like on a film set, it's probably usually a trailer or somewhere, behind a trailer.
Mhm.
But to be in an actual treehouse or like a filming location, that's pretty sweet.
I wonder if I hope that they left it there after the movie.
I mean,
If
I
it's like a
wonder.
standing treehouse somewhere in Salt Lake City right now.
It's funny because I think about too, like the idea of just like a vacant lot like that. I remember in the show Hey Arnold, a Nicktoon on Nickelodeon's back in the '90s,
Hmm.
Nickelodeon. They had like one of those within the city where all
Yeah.
the kids could go play like baseball, and I was like, oh, man, I bet almost all of them are like gone in metropolitan areas.
In this day and age, yeah, dude.
Pomona might have a
Or they
few,
all
but
have those signs around them about no trespassing with chain link fence around it. And you're like,
yeah,
it's
right.
just a field. Why do you have chain link fence? Come on.
Mike Vitar, who played Benny, didn't originally audition for that role. He was considered for a smaller part, but the filmmakers were so impressed by his athletic ability that they cast him as Benny because he was a real life baseball player. And I guess he just looked natural in that role, which
That's
that's pretty dope.
wild.
I mean, that's pretty
Just to
cool.
think of
Like,
anyone other than Benny playing Benny, right?
yeah. The scene where the boys play baseball under the 4th of July fireworks was, I guess, incredibly hard to film because the fireworks were real. And so they were capturing the actual actors' reaction to those fireworks. So these are not like, oh, we got, a static shot of fireworks at like the Dodger game. And then we just told them, like, hey, imagine there's fireworks up there. Apparently they did it for real. And there was like ash and parts of like the fireworks and everything falling on the kids. So they could only use a few of the shots because people were getting hit with things in the eye. And I guess also the wonder on their faces was real.
That's kind of cool. But I mean, I can also imagine that you actually being able to do it if you film that in some place like Salt Lake City. Like just growing up in the Midwest, and I know you know this, like the fireworks shows are superior in every way to like West Coast, drought ridden, fire prone state
Yeah, I always
fireworks
remember.
shows. And I
I thought,
remember like going to like baseball games and them doing fireworks shows, and like you could see the ash like falling on the field and landing on people and stuff because they can just go all out. It's insane.
well, and I remember too, like, it was funny that, like, where we grew up, we're on like the border of Michigan, and it was like you could buy fireworks in one state, but it was illegal to light them off. And you could light them off in the other state, but it was illegal to sell them.
Yeah, something weird
It
like
was
that, right?
something weird where it was like, why? But it was close enough that you could do it. You're like,
Yeah,
oh, hey, we're gonna go to this lake house and light off fireworks. They're like,
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know. It was like this weird technicality. But
Yep.
yeah, Midwest fireworks were dope. Uh the dog known as the Beast was portrayed by two different animals, an English Mastiff named Gunner and a puppet that was built for the film's more exaggerated scenes.
Okay.
So in order to enhance that legend, Hercules had to be larger than life, and they got his name right. The memorable vomit scene on the carnival ride was created using a mixture of split pea soup, baked beans, oatmeal, and gelatin. And the actors actually had to eat this concoction and then spit it out to simulate vomiting.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Eating that, I would probably just barf. That
Yeah.
sounds disgusting.
Well, apparently it was one of the kids' favorite scenes to shoot, which you could imagine. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
that's
probably having a
something
blast
kid
with it.
actors would love.
Yeah. In a fun twist, the actor who played Squints and the actor who played Wendy reunited years later for a Sandlot reunion in 2018, and they actually recreated their famous pool kiss for fans
No, that's
all
cool.
those years later.
That's funny.
Let's see here. James Earl Jones, who played Mr. Myrtle, was initially hesitant to take the role. However, after reading the script and learning about the film's themes of friendship and childhood, he agreed to join the project. His character's backstory involving blindness due to the baseball injury added depth to his character, which he liked. And it's still funny because, like, I knew that was Darth Vader, you know,
Mhm.
even at the time when I was a kid, and I can still hear Darth Vader when he talks. Like, I just can't help it.
I mean, I love that. I mean, first of all, James Earl Jones makes that character so memorable, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
granted, it kind of throws off the whole history with Jackie Robinson, but despite that, it's great. I love it. Did you ever hear the story about James Earl Jones on set with the kids?
No.
Okay. So I heard this. One of the actors was talking on a podcast, and he said that, because this is this is shortly after Return of the Jedi, right? That this movie
Yeah.
is being produced. And so all the kids were on set, and they're like James Earl Jones came in for like one day to do that sequence because he's in the movie
Yeah.
for 5 minutes. And all the kids are like, "Oh my gosh, it's Darth Vader! It's Darth Vader! It's Darth Vader!" And like they were really excited, but they were really nervous to talk to him, right?
I
So
bet. Yeah.
one of the kids went up there and he's like, "Hey, you're Darth Vader, right?" And I guess James Earl Jones, just like without missing a beat, turns around and goes, "No, I am your father."
Oh, that's so
And
dope.
the kids just lost it.
That's amazing. I mean, he literally is like the embodiment of Darth Vader. Have you ever seen those footage, those clips of uh what was
Mm-hmm.
the bodybuilder's name?
Mm-hmm.
Prowse, David Prowse.
Yep.
Where he reads Darth Vader's lines while he's on set, and it's like, some British guy,
And
just
it's
like
just not
I think he's Scottish,
intimidating in
maybe.
any way.
Yeah, it's like you're like, nope, that doesn't work. Like, his performance amazing, but I guess I didn't know this, but he was under the impression that they were going to use his voice,
Yeah,
and
I
it
heard
ended
that.
up causing like kind of a rift between him and Lucas, I think up until David Prowse died.
Yeah.
So he was very upset that he felt he'd been lied to or something. Even though,
Yeah.
he always sort of embraced the Star Wars fans. He used to go to conventions and do
Mm-hmm.
different stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
just him and Lucas always had that little tweak. But CP, there is our Star Wars mention for the episode.
We knew it was going to come eventually, so there
Yeah,
it is.
it almost always does. And then one of the interesting facts was I guess they do reunion things now. They did one for the 25th and the 30th release anniversary of the movie in it's called like Smyrna Beach. And with many of the cast and the director returning for showings of the movie, cast signings, meet and greets, and other fun activities, which is pretty cool because if you go all the way back to the top of this episode, and we're like, why don't they make movies like this anymore? And right, is it still relevant all these years later? You're like, it really is for fans. Like they love the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's really cool. So while we're on the topic though of baseball, so I'm going to switch gears here for a second, CP. So baseball.
Baseball.
We don't have to talk
American
Sandlot.
pastime.
Yeah, we don't have to talk Sandlot specifically, but I just want to talk to you about baseball. Is it still America's pastime, or have we flipped a switch and gone straight to football? Like we're over it.
I don't think we're over it, but I don't think baseball. I mean, are we actually gonna have a baseball conversation on a
Yeah, we're talking a baseball
I think
movie. We're
part of
gonna
the
talk
problem is
baseball.
I think the steroid era really tainted baseball for so many fans and players, and the witch hunt that it became, right?
Yeah,
Just destroyed. I think it turned a lot of people off, right?
yeah.
And I think football now is, I mean, obviously, football is the most successful sport right now,
At least in America.
financially in terms of viewership. But I think that unfortunately, that kind of whole late 90s steroid era, all that stuff really did a
I am
lot of harm to the game.
I am inclined to actually agree with you here because I remember the magic that was McGuire versus Sosa and that chase to get
Mm-hmm.
Hank Aaron's record and become the home run king of baseball. And it
Yep.
was magic. I don't even know if I in my lifetime I've ever seen baseball at like a higher point. And this was important because it came shortly after the strike, I think, which was a
Yep.
down period for baseball, and it like launched new stars into the
Mm-hmm.
stratosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball was probably like as big, as ever. And it was so exciting. I remember going to school, every day and it was like, did you see he hit the home run? And you'd ask your parents if you could stay up late to watch. And once they introduced the steroid scandal, and instead of sort of grandfathering these guys and just sort of being like, listen, going forward, we are not allowing that.
Yeah.
I mean, a tacit admission that like we knew this was going on, but like going forward, if you test positive, we have a problem. But that's not what they did. They went on that witch hunt back through history to find out any story, quote, name on a doctor's anything to be like, did this guy ever use?
Well, I mean, to the point that there were congressional hearings about players using
Yeah, it was
steroids.
wild. They villainized everybody. And which is like, on one hand, I understand like it only takes going to that level to actually rid the game of steroids, of which, right, we still know players use banned substances and different things, but generally, like, it did take the game to a level where, like, if you have used a banned substance, like, fans turn on you, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And there are baseball purists that are like, hey, listen, it never had a place in the game. It never should have been a part of the game. And I don't want to do asterisks or anything, and try to lighten that load for these guys that essentially cheated. You
Yeah.
know, right now, the steroid scandal lives on in the fact that so many of these guys have not been inducted into the Hall of Fame to this day, despite their
Yep.
contributions to baseball lore, record holding, and all these other elements, whether it's World Series or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and instead of just everybody being comfortable with, like, just okay, he used, but in a period where people used,
Hmm.
Whatever, take that for what you will. We're stuck with, to this day, dude, people still debate. And I feel like it turned a lot of people off. I think
Well,
you're right.
and I think the problem is it's not, modernist versus purist or whatever. I think the problem is when you take every single major star in your sport and rake them across the coals for the court of public opinion. Like no one wins that.
Yeah.
All you do is destroy baseball and turn people off when, you know, everyone who's a fan of baseball at the time can't look at any of the stars and be like, "Oh, he's still great. He's a good guy." Because you made a point of hunting every one of them down and tainting every one of their image and legacy and record.
Yeah, it just puts a sour taste in everybody's mouth. So, I mean, I think baseball has made strides in recent years with the pitch clock. You know, I think even just star power, Otani
Mm-hmm.
coming to the league has been huge for baseball. I mean, I don't know if you saw a few weeks ago, they had like an Otani bobblehead at Dodger Stadium, and people literally lined up around the stadium. I mean, this guy's popularity is unlike
Yeah. Yeah.
anybody we've seen in a long time, which is great for the sport. It's exciting. With the pitch clock came shorter game times or
Mm-hmm.
faster games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Otani himself is looking at a potential 50-50 season,
Yeah.
50 home runs, 50 stolen bases, which has never happened before. Like there's
They
definitely excitement,
they created the World Baseball Classic and stuff like
which was
that to really raise the profile. And like it's all great, but you know, it took a major drop off in the late 90s, I think, unfortunately, that it's working to
yeah.
rebuild.
Unlike the lockout season, which it was like, hey, they rebounded a little bit right after that. It's like, dude, the steroid scandal has tainted baseball for like 2 decades.
Yeah.
It's taken a real long time.
Yep.
Um, Even if you're a fan, like I've been to a baseball game this year, I had a great time. But yeah, casual people,
Yep.
you know, and that's where football wins. I think it's obviously it's only once a week versus games every day, but like I can't remember the last time people were like, "Hey, come over for the baseball game." It's always come over for the football game. That already happened
Mm-hmm.
to me twice. I went places college football was back. And yet Dodger games are on all the time, but it's not like, "Oh, hey, come over for the game." Maybe playoffs, but I don't know. That's a different thing.
It's a bummer.
Well, we'll wrap up. We're talking about baseball. Let's just wrap up by combining baseball back with movies, but we're not going to talk Sandlot specifically here. What would you say are like your top three baseball
Oh
movies?
man. Man, this is a
And
tough
I
one.
left these out of the summer movie discussion because I knew we were going to be talking about it later. So some of these might actually fit in. And if you're one of those people that loves one of these films and it was omitted, hopefully you're listening all the way till now and just correct me in a comment later.
All right. So here's the deal. And I know we've talked a couple times on this podcast about sports movies. I'm assuming that my rankings have changed a bit, but when we're talking baseball specifically, hmm,
Yes. I mean, I'll say this: Sandlot is like my favorite baseball movie. Like, we'll just start there,
okay.
and then I'm gonna pick three more. But we've been talking about Sandlot long enough that I'm just gonna be like, okay, Sandlot, you're there. But I think I don't know if I had to guess for you, is Major League?
Oh, Major League is my favorite. Yeah, that would be my top. I love that
Yeah.
movie. I think it's hilarious.
How many sequels did it get?
Three.
So
Well,
there's
two
four.
sequels. So there's three Major League movies.
Okay.
The other two are nowhere near as good as the original, but I think the
Yeah, I mean,
original is hilarious.
it is amazing. Yeah, and just so many classic characters from that movie. Like that's one of the things that always stands out to me.
Yep.
What about A League of Their Own? There's no crying in baseball.
A League of Their Own is not one of my favorite baseball movies, which is weird because it has Tom Hanks in it, but it just, I don't know, man.
That might be up there for me. I always love watching that movie. I find that more often than not, it's usually when it's on TV and I put it on. So I would say I don't go out of my way to watch it all the time, but I do. It is on often and
Okay.
I see it frequently. Yeah.
All right. All right.
What about bench warmers?
Would not in any way
Adam
consider that in
Sandler
the
style,
upper echelon of baseball movies, D-man.
is Happy Gilmore one of the best hockey or golf movies? I think so.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, there's so many good ones, and there's the kids ones that we mentioned earlier, Rookie of the Year, Angels in the Outfield, um, some of those bench
Which
warmers.
I freaking love Rookie of the Year. I mean, it's about the Cubs, so I love that. I think in that same way, you got to throw in something like Little Big League, right?
Yeah.
Kind of that kids comedy movie, family movie.
What about are you a Field of Dreams guy?
I hated it when I was younger,
You
but
hated
now
Field
I
of Dreams?
actually love Field of Dreams. Again, James Earl Jones comes back. It's an
Yeah.
interesting movie how it's about so much more than just baseball.
I know, it's
Um,
it's a classic. Or
yeah.
I mean, for instance, Moneyball, which is about baseball, but it's not like
Moneyball
a
is like,
baseball movie, like in terms of, oh, are they chasing this? It's like statistics and
yep,
how do you do the back end of building a baseball team?
love Moneyball.
I
It's
think Moneyball would
insane
be in mine.
in the sense that, I mean, as you kind of said, it's a baseball movie where we actually aren't watching people really play that much baseball.
Only during the streak, really,
Yep.
do they show some baseball sequences. Otherwise, most of the movies around the clubhouse, it's
All the back
trading
office
guys.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An angry manager. It's working with these scouts. It's all that, which is actually really fun. I
Mm-hmm.
found the
No, I
movie to
agree.
be incredibly intriguing. What about like 42 or Bull Durham?
I mean, those are much more baseball
I
related.
mean, 42 it's this, story of Jackie Robinson. And I mean, yeah, it's like obviously it's dealing with race and integrating baseball and all of these other elements. But I mean, there are some great baseball sequences. But I mean, it's probably a movie that most people that are fans of baseball, like if you don't already know, the story of Jackie Robinson, you should probably see that movie.
Yeah, right.
I mean, 42 gets celebrated every single season. Like I forget what day it is, but uh yeah.
Yep. Every single year. What
So
about 61 Asterisk? Did you ever see that one?
no,
The
I
one
never
about
saw
Roger
that one.
Maris?
I did see it on the list of baseball movies, but I never saw it.
Did you ever see For the Love of the Game?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's a good one. I don't know. If I had to pick, I think I'm going like Sandlot, Moneyball, and either A League of Their Own or Field of Dreams, probably. That's probably mine.
Okay.
I think those are really good.
I think that those are good choices. As I said, I think that my tops would probably be, I'm not going to count the Sandlot because, you know,
Yeah.
everybody knows. I'm going to count Major League, Moneyball, and then Rookie of the Year.
It's the Cubs, though. I'm a White
I
Sox
know
guy.
it's the Cubs. It's great, man.
There are some classic characters from that as well. Uh, Even Angels in the Outfield, I think, that was like a fun kids movie. I mean, I'd have to rewatch it though. It's been a minute.
It has doesn't have Joseph Gordon-Levitt as the main kid.
Yeah, it does. He's been around that long.
Yeah. Him
JGL, dude.
and Danny Glover's the manager.
Yeah. And then what's his name? Marv.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't he? No, that's Rookie of the Year.
Rookie of the Year has has
That has Marv.
no
Harry? No,
no he who's the star player in Rookie of the Year?
the pitcher guy, right?
It's Tony Danza. Tony Danza's in it.
Oh yeah. Nope. I know. Well, I mean, I'll throw it out to our listeners then. I mean, those are quite a few baseball movies. I'd be curious to know what your guys' thoughts are. Top three baseball movies. So send us your lists, and we'll be sure to address those in the shout outs. And then, as I mentioned, if there's anything you think we missed, or if there's anything that you have a theory or would like to correct us on, let us know, and we'll see if we can maybe do some segments, get some people on the show. Now that we have guests, CP.
Do we know any pro baseball players we can take on this on as a guest to talk about baseball?
I don't.
Neither do I.
But all right, well, that does it for our episode. I hope everybody had a good time. I know I had a lot of fun watching Sandlot again in
Me
honor
too.
of the end of summer, Labor Day weekend. So it was quite fun. But be sure to continue the conversations. You can find all of our social media and a feed of all previous episodes at filmmakerscompass.com. And you can follow the show at Film Comp Podcast or Film Comp Pod. So you can follow me at Big Kid D-Man and
And
CP.
you could follow me at AndyCal5. Thank you for hanging out and talking Sandlot with us this week. We see you back here next week. Until then, keep watching movies.